My topic was diabetes, and I specifically chose diabetes type 1. The pathophysiology of type 1 diabetes is that it's an immune-mediated destruction of insulin-producing pancreatic beta cells, causing an insulin deficiency in your body. This means that your body is unable to produce insulin correctly, and you have to inject yourself with insulin in order to be able to maintain the proper amount of insulin that your body needs. Um, Type 1 diabetes has 3 stages. Stage 1 is asymptomatic and it's a preclinical stage. It's the onset of autoimmune beta cell destruction. And during this stage, there's a normal fasting glucose and a normal blood glucose, and there's 2 pancreatic antibodies. Stage 2 is still asymptomatic, and there's pancreatic antibodies with an impaired fasting glucose. And during this time, there's also an impaired glucose intolerance and a glycated hemoglobin. Stage 3 is when you start to become symptomatic. And during this stage, there's a symptomatic hyperglycemia, and your fasting glucose will reach 126 milligrams per deciliter, and your blood glucose will reach 20 milligrams per deciliter 2 hours after receiving 75 grams of insulin, and your A1C will be greater than or equal to 6.5%. So some risk factors for type 1 diabetes are family history, age, and genetics. Family history specifically is really important for type 1 diabetes because it affects your genetics really a lot. Your parents and siblings are a big indicator on if you will eventually develop type 1 diabetes. If they have it, you have a greater risk to develop it. Your age is also a big risk factor for it. You're more likely to develop it when you're younger. There's 2 main peaks for it, and the first one is between 4 and 7. And the second peak is between 10 and 14. And like I mentioned in the family history, it affects your genetics. And these certain genes are HLA to HLA DQA1 and the HLA DQB1 gene and the HLA DRB1 gene. It affects those 3 genes mainly. Nutrition also plays a crucial role in maintaining blood sugar levels. So nutrition plays a crucial role in type 1 diabetes. You should be consuming less calories from carbohydrates and more from fats and proteins. You should also be balancing carbohydrates, exercising, and balancing your insulin because this is important to maintain a healthy blood glucose level and you don't want to go into a sugar shock. Some nutrition guidelines for type 1 diabetes are you're supposed to limit your carbohydrate serving to 2 to 4 per meal and 1 to 2 per snack. And physical activity is good for maintaining the best blood glucose. And eating carbohydrates increases your insulin and exercising decreases it. So in order to maintain the best blood glucose, eating the proper amount of carbohydrates, exercising correctly, and taking your insulin as directed is the best way to not go into a sugar shock and maintain the proper amount of insulin in your body. You don't want to over exercise. You don't want to overeat carbohydrates because your body will have either too much insulin or too little insulin. And that could cause your body to go into too much stress and it could lose too much sugar or gain too much sugar. So there's 6 main healthy habits I found for type 1 diabetes that were super important. So the first one is carb counting. And like I talked about last, if you eat too many carbohydrates, you could get too much insulin in your body. And regular physical activity is really good. Um, Regular physical activity is really good. You don't want to have too much physical activity and have your insulin go too low. Regular blood sugar checks are also really good. So you know what your sugar is at and you're not dropping too low or going too high. You also want to be taking your insulin as directed by your doctor. You also want to be eating healthily. So this means trying to get your sugars from fats, proteins, fruits, and vegetables, and trying to stay away from getting your carbs from like carbohydrates. And you want to try and not get any added sugars as least as possible. Um, all of that will tend to increase your sugars, and you could possibly go into a sugar shock and need more insulin or less insulin. And it's very hard to make up for either of those. And here are my references.